And so thank you for the assistance, Beth. Thank you. Oh my gosh, was that not a great show? Is that not amazing what God can do? Where were y'all when I needed you? So my name's Christine McDonald, and so I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about my story because, like, I spent 21 years on the streets, right? I spent 21 years on the streets, but before I made it to the streets, I spent a lot of time being homeless as a kid, and in and out of the foster care systems, living in hotels and sleeping in cars when my mom had one, and just all of those things, right? In and out of institutions, while my mom was in and out of facilities. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to where I'm at today, and just some of the amazing things God has done, because God is the ultimate healer. And I think we forget, I think the best way to articulate, I was thinking about this when they picked me up at the train station, although I took a bus, but I was at the train station. It's the craziest thing, and that's another story. I'm still wrapping my brain around it. But there is a cancer called despair. And the people that y'all serve are struggling with that cancer. And you know, you can't always see the cancer. It's inside, and you got to peel away the onions and peel away the layers. And oftentimes when we're in the midst of our own despair, we don't even know the root cause, where it began, and how it just infested and festered and grew root in our souls and in our bodies and in our minds. And you guys are serving and healing that cancer called despair, and that is a beautiful thing, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. I just think that's a simple way to articulate, I think, the darkness that I know that I felt in the midst of my mess. So in and out of the foster care system, I'm just telling you, by the time I was in the 7th grade, I'd been to 21 different schools. And when you're living in and out, when you're living in and out of a lot of mess, like my mom, you know, she struggled with mental illness, so she was in and out of asylums, right? And so she couldn't help it that she didn't have the capacity to be a mom, but unfortunately, I was the collateral damage, right? And that's really just the easiest way to make it make sense. The people that you serve, everybody has a story, and I love that Beth cares about the narrative, because we don't care about how and what you're doing right now in this moment. We got to understand how people get to where they're at to be in that moment, because until we understand that, we're not going to be able to serve them, because we're only seeing what's happening in that moment, right? And so the beautiful thing is, how did you get here, right? In this place and time, right? There's always a story. And when you can find that one little place, the healing begins. So I know in and out of the foster care system in 21 different schools, there's not much time to learn. So in the 8th grade, you know, I went about 2 weeks. I knew my ABCs, I knew my 1, 2, 3s, but I was illiterate. It's funny now, because I done graduated from seminary and wrote a couple books. How's that happen? Because God restores what the locust has stolen. He promises that, right? I didn't believe in God, didn't know anything about God. My mom was an atheist. I'd never been exposed to God. I didn't know anything about the love of Jesus Christ. I didn't know much. At 15, I'd been in and out of the system so many times. I'd been sexually abused. My mom had traded me to a man for stable housing that had a thing for pubescent little kids at 8 years old. And I'm going to tell you, don't go back and be a kid after that. And when school's the only place that you're reasonably safe, you don't have much opportunity to learn, right? So I was broken before I became homeless, like on my own homeless. At 15, in an abandoned house in the middle of winter in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, I knew I was better with my own judgment. And 15-year-old judgment ain't very good, y'all, and y'all that got teenagers. I'm just saying. Our best thinking is pretty much a mess. But my best thinking was even worse, because I was already very broken. Right? I had layers and layers of trauma, right? And all I wanted was to be loved. We're innately designed by our Creator to crave love, right? the one thing that I yearned and longed for. So guess what? I started looking for love in all the wrong places. Right? So at 15 in an abandoned house in the middle of the winter, all I knew is I didn't want to get caught because I'd just go back to the justice system. I'd just go back as a runaway. I'd just go before that judge. He'd just send me to another home where I'd probably be sexually abused again, or somebody was just collecting a check. Right? I was one of those throwaway kids that nobody cared about. The problem is that we even have that mindset that kids can be throwaway kids and things like that just happen to kids like that. That in itself, we should be ashamed in our culture. But unfortunately, that's how we look at things. They're poor folks. They're from the wrong side of the tracks. Things like that just happen. Right? We're wrong. Each and every one of us is beautifully and wonderfully made by a creator that loves all of us and has a plan and a purpose for all of our lives, and we deserve to know what that is, and we deserve to know that Jesus loved us enough to die for us. But with a cancer called despair, how can we? Hope breathes life, and you guys are breathing life into these people by giving them hope, letting them be seen. So here I am at 15 in an abandoned house. I'm walking around trying to figure out if I can find a place to get a job, because I'm going to lie about my name and I'm going to lie about my age. And a guy pulls up and offers me a job. He says, "You see this here Thrifty Nickel?" I know this is a big swanky city. Y'all probably don't even know what a Thrifty Nickel is. But if you do, you can say, "Yeah." Okay, there's a few of you. And he did. He had a job, and he gave me a job. I was selling flowers and honky-tonks, and with an accent like that, trust me, I can sell a flower and a honky-tonk. And I told him I was 15. I told him my name was Stacy Carr. I said I was 19 so I could be a grown-up Stacy, because everywhere I went, Stacy was beautiful and pretty and popular and smart, had friends, everything that I wanted to be and that I wasn't. And I went to work, and what happened is that this man was grooming me. I was a vulnerable runaway, right, that was very broken. And he groomed me. Eventually, I was selling trinkets in strip clubs, and eventually he would sell me for $2,500 to a man that owned strip clubs, where I'd be bought and sold in the VIP rooms in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Coffeyville, Kansas, and Oklahoma City. At 17, I was too old. I'd been introduced to drugs, so I learned about cocaine. And what I learned about cocaine, let me tell you about drugs. If you got a bunch of trauma, and you need to know this when you're working with vulnerable people, drugs become a coping mechanism. It's not a healthy coping mechanism. It's not okay. But you know what? When you're going through a whole lot of stuff, if you're getting high, you don't have to think about it, because you're distracted trying to figure out how am I going to get high again, so I don't have to think about the things that I'm trying to get high, so I don't have to feel. So I used to get high, so I didn't have to think about what the men were fixing to do to me. And then when they were done, I would get high, so I didn't have to think about what they had just done to me. And in the midst of all that, I became a full-blown addict. At 17, I was too old, wasn't bringing in the money, and I was addicted. I had been beaten, I'd been locked in cages, I'd just gone through a whole lot of things. And I don't want to send anybody to trauma therapy today. So we're not going to go into detail, but you can use your imagination, and it probably still won't come close. At 17, I was escorted off at gunpoint, didn't even know what city I was in, didn't know what day it was, and I had nobody to call. If I would have had a chance to call somebody, who would I have called? I wasn't even allowed to use the restroom on my own. At 17, walking across that parking lot, a guy pulls up beside me and says, "Hey, you need a lift?" I'm like, "Sure." He's like, "Where are you heading?" I said, "I have no idea." And he says, "Well, I'm heading to Iowa." And I said, "The potato state?" And he said, "Darling, that'd be Idaho." See, I didn't have much of an education. I said, okay, Iowa, Oklahoma, it sounds the same. Because this is what I thought. I thought if I could go somewhere new, I could redefine who I was, and nobody would have to know all the things that had happened to me. And I could have a new beginning. That's what I believed. But I was so broken. And wherever you go, there you are. So I ended up, I said, "Well, you go anywhere between here and there?" And he's like, "Well, Kansas City's a halfway." So Kansas City, Missouri. He dropped me off in downtown Kansas City, Missouri at the park, over at Restart in that park, where the vultures found me. Right? Girl, you ain't safe here. What you doing here? And of course, my accent gave away I wasn't from these parts. Guy swooped me up. Before I know it, I was now his possession, and I spent 17 years being bought and sold on the corner of Independence Avenue and Spruce. I went through a lot of things on that. I had a kid, and I abandoned her, got a trick baby, left her at the hospital at Truman Medical Center when I gave birth. The only person I had to call was a dope man because I knew my trafficker, my pimp. At the time, he would sell her on the black market. So I left her because it was the safest thing I could do for her. Called a dope man, brought me some dope like any good dope man would do. I hit the streets again. It's been a long time. The corner I worked in at Independence Avenue Spruce, I'm going to tell y'all, there were 3 churches. 3 churches. A whole lot of opportunity for people to come and go to offer me hope, the love of Christ, salvation, to be seen. And that never happened for me. It never happened to me. There was a church down the street we could go eat once in a while, but you couldn't eat unless you heard the preaching. And when you heard the preaching, you had to get told that you were evil and that you were dirty and you were tainted and you were wicked and you needed to turn from your ways. But nobody told me where to turn. Nobody told me how. Nobody told me the beautiful love story that Jesus came here and wandered and hung with the lepers, the prostitutes, the discarded, the unseen, the unloved, well, and the politically incorrect. And guess what? He chose to die so I could have life. And he knew everything I would do and all my past I would have and died for me anyway. And that's such a beautiful love story that I never heard, right? I didn't need somebody to judge me. My goodness, I was being bought and sold every day. I tried to get services a couple of times, and one time, see, services don't always work. That's why meeting people where they're at is so important, right? Services want you to fit in a box, and if you don't fit in a box, you don't get services, right? We're not boxes. Nobody heals from their trauma the same way. Like when I got clean, I wasn't ready to deal with my trauma. I got clean and got solid on my sobriety, and then I focused on my trauma. Some people focus on their trauma and they maintenance use while they're working on their trauma until they think they can let go of their drugs. There's no right or wrong. I think good, better, best, right? It's a little better than what they were doing. It's not the best, but it's better. And then eventually we make it to good. And then eventually we have the best, right? It's a process, and everybody's process is different because God made us all differently. So, my last day on the streets, I almost took a life at gunpoint. You can watch the movie and see the rest, or buy one of my books and read the rest of the story. But when I exited, in my time of homelessness, exploitation, and addiction, I tried. I've been arrested 103 times. I've been to prison 7. I went to one of them places they tell you to go to when you get out of prison. They were going to help me. They told me I was unrehabilitatable. You know why I was unrehabilitatable? Because I was homeless too long. I've been addicted too long. I've been arrested too many times, and I was illiterate. They said they could help 12 people with the amount of services it would take to help me. And because I didn't have community, my chances of success were 0, and that is not what their donors wanted to see. Right? The thing is the longer you've been homeless, the longer you've been addicted, the more things that have happened to you, the more messy it is. That's why we have to meet people where they're at, and we use person-centered, strength-based case management. That's why we walk alongside them. A lot of times, poverty becomes your choice, and you don't have a choice. You're living on survival mode. So when we create opportunities for you to choose what your life looks like, we're connecting with their humanity, something that they feel they've lost years ago. And you guys are doing that here. You guys get tonight to be a part of that. Right? It might be with the check. It might be signing up for those volunteers. You guys get to be a part of that. So do y'all want to hear a little bit about my God story before I go, or is my time up? I'm asking Beth. Okay. I know she runs a tight ship around here. I'm trying to be compliant. My freedom date is November 21st of this year. It'll be 20 years since the last day I stood on that corner. Right? Thank you. And August 24th, I celebrated 19 years clean and sober. God is good. So I didn't do the God thing on the streets. I'd been paid for by pastors. Right? It's really hard to believe. I mean, I went to a soup kitchen one time where you could clean up afterwards and get a second meal. It was a pancake breakfast. You get a second meal if you help clean up. And it was in the winter, and I was wet, and I was cold, and it was raining outside, and I had on shorts, and I didn't have no shoes, and he took me down where the clothes closet was, said I could pick out some dry clothes, and he came down and said, I got $15. I never paid for a prostitute before, but what do you think I can get? So it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around these Christian people and love, right, and non-judgment, right? To me, they were no different, right? So I get clean. I get off the streets. Like I said, my last day on the streets, a guy had paid for me. I'd been on those steps praying, if there's a God and if you're real, let the next car be the one that takes my life, because I thought that was the only out for people like me. I believed that. And I get in a car, and he pays for my services, and he takes me down the railroad tracks, and he beat me, and he raped me, and he beat me like I'd never been, and he pulled out a gun. And he told me to get on my knees, and he told me to give him a reason to live. And this is what I thought. I believed that God was answering my prayer, and this guy was going to take my life, and nobody was ever going to hurt me again. I was never going to be hungry. I was never going to be cold. I was never going to be alone. I was never going to be hurt. I was never going to be paid for. That's what I believed. And then I didn't know that people like that thrive on that fear, and I didn't have any. And so I realized he was fixing to violate me all over again because he was mad because I wouldn't beg for my life. And, you know, I'd learned from my mother and her beatings that if you don't fight back, it won't last as long and it won't hurt as bad. And so this God I'd finally prayed to, I felt like betrayed me. And I was angry. I'd finally asked for help. And he denied me. And so I was angry for every person I knew that died in the cold, alone. For my friends that died and nobody cared. For all the times people passed us when we were hungry. For all the times that the world goes on around you every single day and nobody sees the pain you're in, the invisibility, but yet in plain sight. And so I got a chance to get the gun, and I told him to get on his knees, and he told me about his wife and his kids and his job and how valuable he was. When I pulled that trigger, my intention was to murder that man that night. I believe God gave me the strength to not take his life. And in that moment, I didn't just choose his life, it was choosing my own. I threw the gun as far as I could, as hard as I could, gathered my clothes, wiped the blood from my face, and I never looked back. I said, I don't care if nobody helps me. I don't care if anybody doesn't walk alongside me. I tried to get help, tried to go to treatment. And this is what they said. I didn't do the right kind of drugs, so I couldn't get treatment. I didn't have insurance, so I couldn't get treatment. So I literally turned a trick and went to the liquor store and said, excuse me, sir, if you don't drink, but you got to drink in order to blow numbers in this little box beady thing in order to get detox, do you think you could recommend something I could try? And he's like, are you serious? I said, I am. And he looked at me, and he's like, okay. And he introduced me to malt liquor. Got a can of malt liquor, went on down to the detox, drank it. It was the middle of summer, and I was hot, and I threw up. The door. I rang the doorbell. I said, I think I can blow those numbers. Can I get treatment now? And I puked all over her shoes. Look, people think systems and services work. And the reality is, systems, governments are not what is intended to fix stuff. We are. We, the church. We're to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We're to love our neighbors. And we're not supposed to be relying on the government to make the next policy that fixes stuff. We're not. That's not what we were told to do. But we were so far removed from that. So here I am, clean. I'm in a DOC halfway house down on 15th and Campbell. And, of course, I meet a guy. He's got a job. I got a job. Holy smoly. I'm feeling good. I'm clean. So we hook up. And, I'm not healthy. But he doesn't know I'm a prostitute. He knows nothing about my past. He just knows I've been in prison. So we hook up. We become a couple. I get pregnant. I don't know anything about relationships. I have complications in that. And in that complication, I go blind. I go blind in 3 days. And in those 3 days, I have a choice. Medication to save my eyesight, but it'll take the life of my unborn child. And I chose my baby. My son's father left me because he said, we can have another baby. I can't have another you. And I said, well, you're not going to lose me. I'm just going to lose my eyesight. And I can't take a life I'm not responsible for creating. So I chose my son's life, and when he was 5 weeks old, had to have both my eyes medically removed. So my eyes are prosthetics. So here I am with a newborn baby. Son's father left me, and I am looking for a place to live. Nobody will rent to me because I have a criminal past. They give me a voucher for housing, but guess what? I can't get in anywhere with it because I am a drug felon. So the voucher does me no good. But they're touting, hey, we gave X amount of people vouchers. But I couldn't get anywhere with the voucher, so the voucher did no good. Because I was a drug felon. At the time, all drug felons in the state of Missouri were banned from anything government housing, food stamps, TANF, any of those kind of services. I was Pell Grants to go to school, absolutely 100% banned from. So here I was with a newborn baby, clean, drug-free, doing all the right things. Newly blind, not going back to my job as an assistant manager at a restaurant, right? What do you do? Find a place to rent to me, a slumlord, literally 2 blocks from the corner I'd worked 17 years, right behind the church that never did anything. And so here I am with this newborn baby. Baby's father done left, and I hear a knock on a door. I'm newly blind. I got holes in my face because my eyes had just been taken out. So my face is all black and blue because they got to heal so much before they can give you prosthetics. So here I am, terrified. Somebody's going to see me. How am I going to keep my kids safe? I can't get services. I don't know what to do. I know no one. I have no family. I have no community. I have nowhere to turn. My friends in recovery say, I don't know what to say to you. This is too much. When I had my eyes taken out, I was like, well, I'm the same person. I just can't see now. But they all went away because they didn't know what to say. So I was very alone and isolated. Here comes this knock on the door, and I got my baby here, and I'm like, what's going to happen when he wakes up? How am I going to take care of him? And he can't go in the system like I did. And I hear a knock on the door, and I don't say anything because I'm scared it's somebody from the neighborhood that has saw me. And I knew I couldn't keep my kids safe as a blind person. And I was doing all these good things, trying to put my life together. And they kept knocking. Hello, hello. It was a female. Hello, hello. I'm from the church down the street, and I came to meet my new neighbors. Church down the street. I'm hating the church down the street, y'all. Yeah, I know about the church down the street. Y'all watched me get beat. Y'all watched me out there in the winter in the snow with no shoes. Y'all saw me at 88 pounds, starving. Y'all saw me drag across the parking lot by my pimp. Y'all seen me pushed out of moving cars, and y'all did nothing, not even called 911 for me. Didn't even throw me a sandwich or a washcloth to wipe the blood. I know who y'all are, so I'm not answering that door, right? I ain't answered the door. Well, I'd only been in the house for about 3 days. So, I ain't got no eyes, so I can't see. Well, what I did not know was there weren't curtains up everywhere yet. And so she's like, I see you in there. I'm Chris from the church down the street. I came to meet our new neighbors. I was like, oh, now I'm committed. So I go to the door, and she invites me to church. So I go because I have nothing, and I don't know what to do. I sit in there, and I sit in there, and sitting there with my baby. I sit in there, and I keep going back, and I keep going back, and I'm terrified to tell him anything about my story. I don't want him to know who I am because I didn't feel safe, and I didn't feel comfortable. And then finally, they had an outreach, and I wanted to be a part of the outreach. Didn't know nothing about it, didn't know what they did, but I knew I wanted to be a part of something. I wanted to figure out how I belonged because I'd go to those little ladies' groups, and I couldn't say, well, I'm an ex-hooker. Because they're busy talking about problems with their husband or their kids, trying to get them to their soccer games, and we are not the same, right? Right? And I said, so I'd just given my life to Christ. And we were having a baptism coming up at the church. And I was like, well, I'll go on and get baptized, right? And I've been dedicated to going, right? By now, Ricky is like 16 months old. And so he went from a newborn baby to 16 months, right? So I've been saved, but I hadn't yet done the public baptism. So I'm like, well, maybe if I get baptized, I can join the outreach. So I go get baptized. I come up out of the water. I said, excuse me, can I join the outreach now? And they're like, well, you didn't get baptized to do that. And I'm like, well, you know. So I go down to the meeting. And so now I'm saved. There was no magical thing that happened when I got saved. I will say this. I learned once I got saved, I started having those nudges. Like, I would start saying something like, because I was from the streets, pretty drama queen. I had a lot of attitude. I had a lot of anger, right? I was very, very rough around the edges, kind of like taming a wild animal, right? I hadn't been inside in 20 years, except for when I was in prison. I felt safer outside in the park than I did in a hotel room or in a house. And so I noticed that my words would, I would say something, I was like, my gosh, that sure was nice of me. and then I started smiling a little more here and there. I was like, I might be happy. So all these things started happening. So it wasn't this big event after I got saved. But then once I got baptized and I went down to the outreach, I sit down there, and it's in the northeast corridor of Kansas City. If you're familiar with that, so I got a lot of diversity there, but there's a lot of Hispanics down there that are undocumented. So the ministry was to go out and teach them about Jesus. I said, so we're going to go teach the Catholics that speak Spanish about Jesus? Okay, that's fine. Let's go invite them to church. It'll be awesome. Right, we're going to invite them over to this little Christian church. It'll be great. Sure, I don't speak Spanish. Do y'all? Is there a class for that? Everybody gets real quiet. I'm like, hello, did y'all leave me? So the ministry leader's like, well, I don't speak Spanish. I'm like, how long have I been doing this? So that's still rough around the edges. I was like, I don't speak Spanish. Y'all don't speak Spanish. I ain't smart, don't know a whole lot about a whole lot of things, but I see some problems. So I said this. This was 2007. I said, hey, y'all ever notice those people sleeping in the church doorways? Come in. Well, yeah. I said, what about the prostitutes on the corner? Well, yeah. What about those people getting high over there on that wall? Well, yeah, we see them every day. We have to run them off before church. I said, yeah, about that. I said, how about we go reach out to them? And this is what the pastor and the ministry leader said. Oh my gosh, what would we say to those people? I said, I don't know. How about, hello, are you hungry? Would you like a sandwich? I said, I feel like Jesus met people where we are. We can look at the woman at the well. In the most human form ever, he was vulnerable, and he was just him, and made himself present and available in that perfect moment. We oftentimes only think about the reconciliation of sin story here, right? But there's so much more. I feel like that was Jesus in this most human way, just being who he was as a person, as one of us in that moment. And in that moment, right, he met her where she was, and look at the transformation that began. We get to do that by meeting people where they're at and allowing them to be seen. That's what this ministry is doing, and I sure wish y'all would have been around when I needed you. Building community, loving people right where they're at, letting them narrate and guide their process, and being the hands and feet of Jesus through our actions. Allow people to say, why do you do it? So, well, let me tell you about this guy I know. His name's Jesus. why don't you come meet him at our church? We'd love to see you, and I'm sure we got a lot of folks that want to meet you too. There's a world out there waiting for the people that you guys are serving. And the people that you serve are dealing with the cancer called despair. I invite all of you today, as you continue on the rest of the night, because I know there's a lot of stuff going on, to please, please, please search your heart and search your gifts and talents and find a way to be a part of this. You're needed, and this is how you tangibly get to be the part of what Jesus calls us to do. And they're doing it. So that's Jesus in action. So my name's Christine McDonald. Got some books back there. Thanks for your time. There's $5 of every sale tonight of my books goes to support this ministry because I believe in what they're doing. So thank you. I have 1 minute. I need 1 minute. That baby I abandoned, I was speaking at a church in North Kansas City, and I got reconciled in that. And secondly, I want to tell the rest of my faith story because I feel like it needs to be said. So although I gave my life to Jesus, my life with Jesus didn't really get transformational. I'm scared of the dark, y'all. I've always been scared of the dark. Even when I stood out on the streets, I'd be in the brightest corner you could find. I'd never go in the alleys, and I'd never go into dark, and I'd never go into abandoned buildings because I was scared. So when you go blind and you get your eyes taken out, like, there ain't no dark like that dark. So I'm going to tell you, my blindness became my blessing, because the more I understood that Bible and the more I understood Jesus, this is what I learned. When I open my eyes, it's the darkest dark I've ever seen in my life, and I'm still human, so I'm still scared. For Paul had, a thorn in his side, and he asked God to remove it from him, and God said, no, least you boast that what you do is for yourself. You'll always need me to give you the strength. And Paul battered with him, I could do so much more if you would just heal me. God said, no, you need my strength. For me, every morning when I wake up and I open my eyes and I face my biggest fear, I get to say, Jesus, walk with me, carry me, and guide me, because I'm scared. And sometimes that's 4 or 5 times a day. I ain't gonna lie. But that is where my faith went to the next level, is through my blindness. So anyway, I just want to share that with y'all. Thanks.